People talk about becoming new all the time, reinventing themselves, changing their life, leveling up. But no one ever talks about what that really means. They say they want transformation, but when they're asked to let go of everything that once felt familiar, the thoughts, the stories, the pain they've identified with, they resist it. Because it's not just about becoming new. It's about dying first. And that's the part most people aren't ready for. But here's the truth. There is no new life without the death of the old one. There is no next chapter unless the current one ends. That's the real cost of growth. It's not about how much you want the new version of yourself. It's about whether you're willing to bury the old one. And this death isn't physical. It's psychological. It's emotional. It's spiritual. It's the moment you stop defending your old identity. It's the moment you no longer argue for your limitations. It's when you stop saying things like "this is just how I am" and start asking yourself, what if I'm not? What if you were never any of those stories you kept repeating? What if the pain wasn't meant to define you, but to wake you up? That's the moment the death begins. And it's scary because the old identity fought hard to survive. It fed off fear, comparison, and survival. It made itself comfortable in your insecurities. But it was never you. The old version of you was a mask built by memory, by reactions, by things that happened to you. The new version is who you really are, the one who always existed before the fear. But here's the catch. You don't get to meet the new you until the old one dies. And this isn't a gentle process. It feels like a breakdown, like being stripped of everything you used to rely on, like nothing is working anymore. That's not failure. That's the shedding. That's the death. And the reason most people never make it to the other side is because they try to skip this part. They try to add the new life on top of the old self. But that's not how it works. The new life can't live where the old identity still rules. This isn't about tweaking things. This is about surrendering. And if that scares you, good. Because that fear is proof that something real is about to begin. The reason transformation feels so hard isn't because change is complicated. It's because the old self refuses to go quietly. It's like a roommate who knows they're being evicted, but keeps unpacking their bags anyway. Even when the higher self starts to wake up, even when the new version starts to rise, the old identity will cling to the familiar pain like it's home. And it'll use every tool it has to keep you from walking away. Guilt, doubt, shame, even nostalgia. That's the trap. The old self doesn't just use fear to keep you small, it uses comfort too. It'll whisper things like, remember how safe it felt to stay stuck. Or at least you knew what to expect. But that safety was survival. That comfort was a cage. The old identity isn't bad. It was just built during a time when you didn't know who you really were. It was the version of you who had to protect themselves, explain themselves, prove themselves. It's the version that learned how to get approval by dimming the light. It's the voice that said, don't dream too big, or don't love too hard, or don't trust life. That voice isn't your intuition. That's the echo of old wounds. And the more you start becoming conscious of it, the louder it gets, not because it's gaining power, but because it's losing it. The death of the old self feels like chaos because it's losing control. But what's really happening is your true self is waking up. And that awakening isn't peaceful at first. It's disorienting. Because now you're seeing how much of your life was built on unconscious habits, fears, and beliefs that were never yours to begin with. But that's exactly what healing looks like. Not perfection, but awareness. And when you're in the middle of it, you might start to question everything. Who you are, what you want, what's real. That's not confusion. That's clarity tearing down the illusion. And if you try to run back to your old self just because it feels safer, you'll delay the very thing you've been praying for. Because the new version of you can't share space with the one who still believes they're unworthy. One of them has to go. There comes a point in the journey where it feels like everything is falling apart. Nothing makes sense anymore. The techniques, the visualizations, the affirmations, all of it just feels empty. And this is where most people panic, thinking they've done something wrong. But in reality, this is the exact moment things are beginning to shift. It just doesn't feel like it. Because the breakdown always comes before the breakthrough. The collapse isn't failure, it's the demolition of who you no longer are. It's what happens when the old wiring starts to fry out and the new system hasn't fully taken over yet. It feels like darkness, but it's actually rebirth. The truth is, you're not meant to hold on during this part. You're meant to let go. But that's not what the mind wants. The mind wants control. It wants to fix it. It wants to cling to something. But the soul, the real you, is asking you to trust the process that can't be seen yet. To trust that the old self is dissolving even if you can't prove it yet. This is the uncomfortable middle where everything feels like a question and nothing feels solid. But if you can stay with it just a little longer, if you can allow the discomfort without needing to escape it, you'll start to see that this emptiness is not a void, it's space being made for something new. It's like when you clean out a room and suddenly everything looks bare and unfamiliar. At first, it feels like something's missing. But what's actually happening is you're preparing for something different, something cleaner, something aligned. The reason it feels so strange is because you're no longer running the same patterns. You're not reacting the same way. You're not feeding the same pain. but the mind doesn't register that as progress. It calls it lost, so it'll try to convince you to go back, to start checking the 3D, to reach out, to fix something externally so you can feel safe again. But that's the test. That's the fork in the road. Will you trust what you can't yet see? Or will you retreat back to the comfort of what you already know? Because this moment, this space where nothing seems to be working, is actually where the most powerful work is being done. You're detaching from the old identity. You're letting it die, piece by piece. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it's lonely sometimes. But you're not being punished. You're being purified. And if you can hold steady through the fog, you'll walk right into clarity. There's this deep fear that if you let go, you'll lose everything. That if you stop obsessing, stop checking, stop trying to control, then nothing will happen. But that's the lie the old self tells to keep you locked in survival mode. Letting go isn't giving up. It's resurrection. It's choosing to no longer feed the identity that needs struggle to feel alive. It's the moment you stop trying to manifest from desperation and start remembering who you really are. Because if you're still trying to become worthy, still trying to prove something, still trying to earn love, you're still living from the old identity. And no matter how many affirmations you repeat, nothing truly changes until you stop identifying as the version of yourself that needed saving. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop chasing. It means you stop tying your sense of worth to an outcome. It means you finally understand that what's meant for you doesn't require you to abandon yourself. It's not about surrendering to the 3D or pretending you're okay with settling. It's about surrendering your need to control everything because you trust that your imagination already created it. And from that place, you begin to live like it's already done. Not because you're trying to trick the universe, but because you're done waiting to feel whole. That's what changes everything. When you stop chasing outcomes and start embodying the version of yourself who already knows, who already feels, who already trusts. And when the old self tries to come back, because it will, you don't fight it. You just don't feed it. You don't argue with it. You don't try to fix it. You just breathe. You return to the truth. You remind yourself that death is part of the process. And just like the seasons, something has to die for something to bloom. The version of you who once begged for crumbs, who obsessed over the external world, who needed constant proof, that version is dissolving. And it might feel like grief sometimes because it was familiar. But just because something feels familiar doesn't mean it's meant to stay. Letting go is not losing something. It's clearing the way for everything that actually belongs. There's a moment when something clicks. Not because the outside world changes, but because something inside decides to be different. It's not about time. It's not about years of healing. It's not even about working harder on your mindset. Becoming new happens in an instant. The moment you decide you're done living as the version of you who always needs to wait, to prove, to be chosen. The shift is internal, quiet, simple, but it changes everything. Because when you decide you are already new, you stop looking for signs, and you start moving like it's already true. And that's the paradox most people miss. They wait to feel new before they act new. But it's actually the other way around. The feeling follows the embodiment. The reality follows the identity. So if the decision hasn't been made yet, you'll always be waiting for something to happen before you give yourself permission to change. That's how the old self survives, by keeping you in limbo, convincing you that you're almost there, but not quite yet. It'll say things like, once they come back, or once you have the money, or once you see proof, then you'll finally believe. But that's not transformation. That's negotiation. And you weren't born to negotiate with your power. You weren't born to beg for evidence. You were born to create. And that creation begins with a simple inner choice. The old story ends here. Not because the world told you it's time, but because you decided. And yes, the 3D might still look the same. The circumstances might not reflect the shift right away. But that doesn't mean it's not real. The mirror always takes a second to catch up. So you walk differently. You speak differently. You feel differently, not because you're pretending, but because you're no longer waiting. And when the old self shows up, when it tries to drag you back into the old narrative, you don't collapse. You notice it. You see it for what it is, a habit, not a truth. And you return to the decision you already made. That's how you solidify the new self, by choosing it again and again until it becomes natural. This isn't about forcing anything. It's about remembering. Remembering that you were always meant to outgrow the identity that was built in pain. That your true self isn't something you become. It's something you uncover when the noise quiets down. So you stop waiting to feel ready. You stop waiting for everything to be perfect. And you step into the now with the energy of I already am. That's the death of the old and the birth of the new. Not a long, complicated process, but a quiet, powerful decision made in the heart that refuses to live one more day as anything less than the truth. When the old finally dies, something strange happens. It's not loud. It's not even dramatic. It's quiet. like waking up in a different frequency, like remembering something you forgot for years. There's no need to force or chase or fix, because the real you doesn't need to be earned. It just needed space. And once the noise of the old identity fades, once the loops of pain and waiting and fear dissolve, what's left is peace. Not the kind that's loud and exciting, the kind that feels like home. And the real you had been there the whole time, watching, waiting, not judging, just holding the vision. That version of you wasn't trying to fix the world to feel safe. They knew they were safe the moment they stopped identifying with what was never theirs. And it's not about perfection. It's not about being healed all the time or having every answer. It's about no longer needing to perform the role of the one who's still broken. It's about meeting life from a place of truth, not trauma, from a place of worthiness, not lack. The world around you might not understand it right away. That's okay. It doesn't need to, because the shift wasn't for them. It was for you. And suddenly the things you used to chase don't feel urgent anymore. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started trusting. You trust that what belongs to you is already on its way. You trust that your energy speaks louder than your effort. And most importantly, you trust yourself, not the version shaped by fear, but the one shaped by awareness. This is where the real manifestation happens. Not when you force outcomes, but when you align with the self that no longer questions their power. Not when you beg the world to respond, but when you remember the world is responding to the version of you you've chosen to embody. And now, that version is no longer a future self. It's who you are right here, right now. You don't need permission. You don't need evidence. You don't need closure. You just need the willingness to bury the version of you who believed you did. Because once that part dies, what rises is not just a better version, it's the truest one. The one who is never lost. The one who's been waiting for you to finally come home. If this stirred something in you, if it felt like truth more than just words, then maybe you're already in the middle of becoming new, even if it still feels messy. Let the old version go. You don't need it where you're going. And if this resonated, drop a comment below and let me know what part hit the hardest. I will meet you with another golden nugget. Happy manifesting.